Hi everyone, how are you doing today? Still your registered dietitian, nutritionist, and your public health officer, Justina. So today I will take us to advanced way of carbohydrate calculating, especially for diabetic patients and people that want to manage their weight, and also for healthy living. So what does this look into? It looks into glycemic index and glycemic load of food. So what is glycemic index? It is a standardized measure of how quickly a food has the ability to raise blood sugar level, and is being compared to a reference. Mostly this reference is glucose and bread, but mostly glucose is used to compare this. So after the consumption of this food, they will check how quickly this a particular food will raise the blood sugar, and then compare it with how glucose raises blood sugar. Do you understand it now? So after that, they come to conclusion of this is the glycemic index of this particular food. It has a scale of ranking foods into from 0 to 100, where 0 to 55 means that the food has a low glycemic index. From 56 to 69 means the food has a medium glycemic index, and from 70 to 100 meaning that the food has high glycemic index and has the ability to rise blood sugar very high when consumed. So this is just what glycemic index of food means. So we'll look at factors that can influence glycemic index. The type of carbohydrates taken. Most foods are rich in fiber, starch or sugar. We have the simple sugar, we have the complex sugar. Watch my video in macronutrients and importance of fiber, so you'll see what I'm telling you, where different sugars are classified based on the sugar molecules they have. Foods that are high in fiber content are low in glycemic index. So fiber content in a food is very, very important. Fiber helps in easy digestion. Fiber also help in lowering gastric emptying. The fiber helps to reduce digestion of glucose in the body system. So whereby doing this reduction of the digestion process, it helps in the management of sugar. Are we getting? So fiber is important, and it determines also the glycemic index of a food. Then we have the ripeness of a food. The higher the ripeness of a food, the higher GI it has for fruits and vegetables. We'll have a cooking method. The type of cooking method, when you overcook your food, for example, let's say rice or maybe yam or potatoes, when you overcook them, it has a tendency of raising the glycemic index of that food. So cooking is also something to look into. And also fat and protein content of food. When a food contains fat and protein, it helps in slowing the digestion of carbohydrates. So food that are high in protein and fat content also have low GI. So this is what I want you to know. So I will mention some of the foods that and their GI contents, glycemic index content, so that you know them. But why is this important? Why is glycemic index of a food, looking into glycemic index of a food, important? Is because it helps in glucose control, like sugar control, to control blood sugar level, and again it helps in weight management. How does it do this? Remember I told you that food that have high fiber are low in glycemic index, and food that have high fiber is good in weight management. Again, protein content in a food helps also in management of weight. Why is it important? Again, I want to take us to biochemistry somehow. When there is constant consumption of foods high in glycemic index, let's say for a very long time, it has a tendency of raising the insulin level. Insulin responds to food. Whenever we take it, insulin is being produced to carry the sugar that is being digested to the particular cells where it will be needed for energy. That's the work of insulin. High consumption of glycemic index high foods for a very long time can cause overproduction of insulin, causing very high insulin in the blood. We call it hyperinsulinemia. So it is a problem because it can lead to weight gain. How does it do this? when this hormone is being produced, it must act on the sugar. So in the process of trying to act on the sugar, it can trigger the production of glucose from the liver, even when the body is not receiving maybe food. When you watch my video in the basic and advanced way of carbohydrate counting for management of diabetes, where I talked about the basal insulin and the bolus insulin. The basal insulin, which looks into the in between meals and overnight, so it's a basic, it's just there, the body produces it, and the bolus, which comes up when food is being taken, it produces. So overconsumption of this GI food in a very long time can cause hyperinsulinemia, and when there is this hyperinsulinemia, high insulin in the blood, it can act on those liver cells, telling them to produce glucose. When excess glucose in the system, normally it converts it to fat and is being stored in the liver as glycogen. So on starvation, and also the liver reproduces this glycogen into glucose for energy. So this is what hyperinsulin can cause. It can trigger the liver, to produce more and more glucose, and this is how the body will be regulating it, taking up glucose every moment in time and causing overweight, because excess of that glucose will be also restored in the liver as fat, and causing one to be overweight, and obesity can set in and other things. So which meaning that there is risk of cardiovascular diseases also. So this is why you need to consider the type of food you eat and the glycemic index of food you consume. So let me quickly mention some of the glycemic index of food, the foods we have. Okay, so for vegetables have a very low glycemic index, ranging mostly from 10 to 30. So it's not up to the 55. So it has a very low glycemic index. Most vegetables, the green leafy vegetables, the cauliflowers, carrots, all of them have a very low. But potatoes are also under vegetables. Potatoes have a very high glycemic index, ranging from 50 to 100. So sweet potatoes specifically has 63 level of glycemic index. So for dairy products products that contains milk and milk products, so most of them have very low glycemic index, within the range of 11 to 40. So it's not high also. So the main concern is our grains and our pastas. Those are the main concerns. As for legumes also have low glycemic index. Legumes like beans, lettuce, soya bean, all of them, black beans, kidney beans, all of them, they have low glycemic index, ranging from 20 to 40. So do you know why? Because they contain fiber and they also contain protein. Remember what I told you, when a food has a very high fiber and protein in it, it can help reduce the glycemic index of such foods. So this is why beans have low glycemic index. For nuts also, nuts and seeds, they have protein in them also, and fiber in them. They have very low glycemic index of ranging from 10 to 22. Understand? So it's a very low glycemic index. So we have pastas like spaghetti have 30 to 40, macaroni has 45 to 55. Then let's look at the grains. Grains, for whole wheat bread, it has 69 glycemic index. For white bread, it has 70 glycemic index. For brown rice, 50. White rice, 80. Oats, 40 to 50. So barley is 28. So they have white rice has a very high glycemic index. So, and bread also, because white bread is 70. So let's look at fruits. Most fruit have low glycemic index, except one I know about is a pineapple that have 59, which is a medium glycemic index, and whereas watermelon has a very high glycemic index, 72, because of the moisture content. Sorry, I didn't mention this earlier. in the consideration factors that can influence glycemic index. The moisture content of food also can influence glycemic index. That is why watermelon has a very high glycemic index, because it has about, I think, 92% of water in it. But when we look at glycemic load, you see the effects of it, and I will explain there what happened also. Okay, for the glycemic load now, it's also important to consider that. Why? Because glycemic load looks above this glycemic index. It takes into account the glycemic index and the amount of carbohydrate taken in that food, then, and how it now reflects to the blood glucose level. So this is why glycemic load is important, because it looks into the amount of food you are eating and the carbohydrate you are getting from that food. So it now tells you the glycemic load of that food. Also, there is a range. There is a classification for glycemic load where less than 10 or 10 glycemic load of a food shows that it has minimal effect on blood sugar level. Then 11 to 19 shows a medium effect on blood sugar level, whereas 20 and more than 20 shows a very high effect, meaning that food will have very high effect on blood sugar level. It has the ability of increasing the blood sugar level. So how do we calculate this? Remember, I told you that it looks into the glycemic index of a food multiplied with the carbohydrate content of that particular amount of the amount of food being taken, and then divided by 100. Let's take, for example, watermelon. I mentioned watermelon that it has a glycemic index of 72. Let's assume that we are taking a serving size of a watermelon, because you need to know the quantity of food you are taking. And the serving size, it has a weight of 231 gram, about 231 gram. So please, for you to get servings of food and their quantities, watch my video on food serving size, exchange list and portion size. Please, it's very, very important. There you will see the different levels of food and the serving size with their exchange list, the quantity of carbohydrates that should be taken. So you see that most food have been mentioned there already and listed in the quantity that should be consumed, the quantity that make up a serving size. So it will be made easier for me. Just go there, watch the video, then you can return back to this for easy understanding. So we are using watermelon as an example. So we said watermelon has a glycemic index of 72. Then considering the quantity we are consuming, let's say it's a serving size which is having a 15 gram of carbohydrate, because every serving size of fruits have 15 gram. That is why you must watch the video. So 15 gram of carbohydrates multiply by the glycemic index of watermelon, which is 72, then divided by 100. When you do this, you will get 10.8 glycemic load. And remember, in the classification, 10 less than 10 or equal to 10, meaning the food has a very low glycemic index, minimal effect in raising blood sugar level. Are you saying it? So within foods that have low to medium glycemic load, don't have much effect on blood sugar level. So some people will wonder, if you look at this now, I said I would come to this, that watermelon glycemic index is 72. It has the ability to raise sugar level. That's what they will be thinking. But why won't it raise blood sugar level as thought? It's because of the glycemic load, that the glycemic load is very low. It has 10.8, so it has minimal effect in raising blood sugar level. This is for watermelon of 231 gram. 231 gram is just like watermelon of 300 naira now in my country, Nigeria. So when you look at it, you see that it cannot raise a blood sugar level. So do you know what happened? Why glycemic load of watermelon is very low? It's because of still the water content. Because it has a very high water content and it has the ability to dilute the concentration of carbohydrate. That was makes it to result in a very low glycemic load. Understand? So water content of food can affect both the glycemic index, it can higher glycemic index and as much lower glycemic load. So for you to understand this glycemic load, you must know your servings of food. You must know what a serving of food is, so that you can calculate very easily and you know what you're eating. So to do this, let's give more examples. Let's look at more examples on glycemic, on how we can calculate glycemic load of food. For example, let's use rice again. So rice, I want us to use just the standard serving size of rice. For a serving size of rice is what will give us 15 grams for starchy foods. And what will give us 15 grams of carbohydrate. That is what a serving size of rice is. Remember, I gave example in that my video, the video of the basic and the advanced carbohydrate counting for management of diabetes. You will see there that we'll use samples of food. We use an example of the amount of kilocal needed and the carbohydrate needed by an individual to develop a number of serving of carbohydrate that the individual needs to take. So from that servings, you need to know what a serving size is. When you know what a serving size is, you make up to the number of servings, and you come up to the quantity of carbohydrate the person needs in a day. So you must know your serving size. That is why I'm repeating it, that you must watch the video on serving size, portion size, and food exchange list. The serving size of rice is what provides us with 15 grams of carbohydrate. So that is what we are going to use. And the glycemic index of rice is 80. So the glycemic index multiplied by 15 grams of carbohydrate of rice divided by 100 is giving us 12 glycemic load. So this is for a serving of rice. In a serving of rice, we're already getting a 12 glycemic load from it, and that 12 glycemic load from it is under medium. So food that are low on glycemic load does not have much effect on blood sugar level. So this is just a serving size. But what if one eats more than a serving size? And what do you understand by a serving size? What do you understand? I'm just going to give an example with rice, but it's already in the video for you to look at. So for this rice, a serving size, we said, is what will give us 15 grams of carbohydrate. So what is it in amount when you facially look at it? When you look at it, how does it look like? So in the quantity. So calculating it, how to easily calculate it for the professionals, making videos both for the professionals and the individuals, this will help. So for the professional, we have our food composition table where we look at the standard for every 100 grams of food, the nutrient it provides. So the carbohydrate is the main concentration. Now, the carbohydrate produced by a white boiled rice cooked, white boiled rice, the carbohydrate it provides is about 29 for 100 grams of food is 29.64. So 29.64 grams. Remember, fiber is a carbohydrate, is a complex carbohydrate. So for you to get the total carbohydrate in a particular food, you have to subtract the fiber content of it from the total carbohydrate to get the carbohydrate content of that particular food. And the dietary fiber in the 100 grams of boiled rice is 0.65. So subtracting 0.65 from 29.64 will give us 28.99, meaning that the carbohydrate content of 100 grams of boiled rice is 28.99. But we are looking for a 15 grams of carbohydrate. What is the quantity? Then you do your cross multiplication. If 100 grams gives us 28.99, what would 15 grams of carbohydrate provide? If you look at it, it will give you approximately 52 grams of rice. So what is this 52 grams of rice? How do you measure 52 grams of rice? When you look at the food exchange list, they will tell you those ones, they use mostly cups. The standard cup I mentioned in my video, in the standard cup is a standard all over the world, but sometimes we don't have this cup, so you have to bring it down to what you understand. What is it in grams? It can measure, you measure in grams, after that you can measure with your household measures to know what it will give you. This is the cup for a serving of rice. You can see it is 1/3 standard cup, 1/3 standard cup. So this is a cup for a serving of rice. Is this particular quantity of rice, and so that will give you 15 grams of carbohydrate. And then when you calculate the load, that is what we calculated for the glycemic load, it gave us 10.8. So for a 1 serving, when you take 2 servings of boiled rice, you've gotten about 20 glycemic loads. Are you getting it? It's a high glycemic load that has the ability to increase blood sugar level. So this is how we manage our patients with this. We know the quantity you should eat and how you should take them, because we incorporate it with other foods. So we'll calculate the number of foods you need in a day, the number of carbohydrates you need in a day, and again have a goal for glycemic load. When you have a goal for glycemic load, I will give you an example. When you have a goal for glycemic load, so you work on it, making sure that the number of servings of the carbohydrate in the whole day will fall on the goal of your glycemic load. Understand? So this is it for rice. Now for pasta, this is a serving size for pasta, 1/2. If you look at this cup and this cup, this is smaller, and this is a half standard cup. This is a half standard cup, whereas this is 1/3 of the standard cup. So and this particular one is the standard cup, is 1 standard cup. So this one 3 will give you this standard cup. So that means when you have taken this standard cup, you have taken 3 servings of rice, whereas if you take this one 2 of pasta, you have taken what 2 servings of pasta. It is very important you have a target for glycemic load when managing a patient. What is the target? Let's say from 50 to 80 is for people, mostly people that are having very high insulin resistance, and for mostly type 1 diabetics people, and also people that want to lose weight. So having a very low target is very important for them. Then also from between 80 to 120, is suitable for people in type 2 diabetes. Then people that have high insulin sensitivity can have from 120 to 150, but the general target, for diabetic people, you look at 100 to 150 targets of glycemic load in a day. Look at an average of per serving of the glycemic load 10 to 15. Then from there you calculate to get the number of per serving, number of servings, and to get that it will give you 6 to 10 servings. So what will be our target? Let's say from the 100 to 150 glycemic load daily target. For example, let's use 120. So, and also number of servings 8. So when you get that, you see 120, you divide the number of the glycemic target load with the number of servings for us to get the glycemic load per serving. So 120 divided by 8 will give us 15 per serving of every carbohydrate food, 15 glycemic load per serving. So when you've gotten the 15, so you must know your total carbohydrate targets, which is, for example, when we use our 2000 kilocal, you must watch my video in the basic and advanced way of calculating carbohydrates for diabetic patients. There we already had an example. We used the example of 2000 kilocal for a patient. Understand? So gotten the total carbohydrate needed in a day was 250 grams. So when you've already gotten 250 grams already, knowing the targets of your glycemic load, so you divide the total carbohydrate by the glycemic load per serving, which is, we already have our glycemic load per serving as 15. So the total carbohydrate is 250. So that 250 divided by per serving, which is the 15. 250 divided by 15 will give us about 16 seven sizes. That is 15 times 7 of carbohydrates, and each serving of carbohydrates should look at foods that have glycemic load less than 15, or food that has glycemic load less than 15. Do you understand it? This means that considering glycemic load in management of people with diabetes and people that want to reduce weight is very, very important. So again, should we leave glycemic index and consider only glycemic load? No, because both must work together, because the glycemic index will help, give a comprehensive, a general knowledge and helps in development of standards. So whereas the glycemic load helps to personalize diet for people that needs personalized diet, and mostly diet is individualized. So glycemic load of a food is very, very important to consider, because it will help you personalize the individual's diet. So considering the both, the glycemic index and the glycemic load of food will help in perfect carbohydrate management, in the sense that glycemic index help to advise on consumption of healthy foods that are high in nutrient dense and whole grain foods. That is glycemic index, whereas the glycemic load now we have to look at portion control, and portion control is one of the important aspects in management of diabetes.